Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. Enterprise AI isn't just a tool, it's the heartbeat of smart organizations like yours, helping to reinvent work to deliver higher growth, more customers, and better experiences. Join us as we discover how AI-powered work orchestration and automation is making things better for everyone: customers, employees, shareholders, and most importantly, you. Let's get into the show.
Hello everyone, Brad Hairston here. Welcome to Transform Now. My guest today is Tom Davenport, making his fourth appearance on the show. Tom is a renowned author, professor, and one of the leading voices in AI and analytics. Tom, super glad to have you back on. Why don't you share anything else you'd like to with our audience?
Sure, happy to be here. Hopefully I can come up with something new to say on the fourth time. These topics keep changing. That makes it easier. The only new thing for me is I'm the faculty director of a new research center at Babson on technology and entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is generally Babson's thing, but we finally decided to combine it with tech, which is,
Nice.
a very source of entrepreneurship. So I've been doing a little bit more research on venture capital and private equity and startups and so on.
Yeah, fantastic. You're always involved in like 300 things at once. I don't know how you do it. Well, Tom, we're approaching 400 episodes on this podcast, and we've had a lot of repeat guests on the show, but I literally think you are the first 4-time guest. So congratulations on that esteemed honor to be the first 4-timer.
Only 1 out of 100 on average.
Yes, exactly. Well, Tom, among your many accomplishments, you have authored or edited, I think like 20 books or more than 20 books.
27.
27. Okay.
I mean, 27th, I believe.
That's how it goes. You wait like 6 months and you've written 3 more books. So
I've been a bit slow to upgrade my website, but I've upgraded now. Yeah.
Well, one of your recent contributions, so it wasn't a book that you authored per se, but you contributed to it, was a book titled Agentic Artificial Intelligence.
I am the third author of this with lots of other ones too. So
by being the third name, does that make you the third most important, or?
I'm clear. I didn't really know until I saw the cover where I was going to end up. So,
well,
I guess it means maybe I did, the third most in terms of my contribution, but I haven't actually asked Pascal Bornet, who was the orchestrator of this thing.
Right. Well, it's a laundry list of, or kind of a who's list of people that understand, AI and automation. And our company knows a lot of the people that contributed in addition to you. And it's a great read. I read it myself. As you just showed it, it's a big book. In fact, across the company, we call it the big white book. So, 500 pages, some odd. You gotta really be dedicated to Agentic to get through it, but it's really, really good. And so I guess the first question to you is what unique perspective did you bring to the book with your contribution?
Well, I think there were probably 2, one positive and one not negative, but cautionary. I would say most of the things that I played a role in writing from the beginning were related to what's the human role in all of this, and will humans be disappearing completely? And Pascal is, like me, a believer that that wouldn't be a good thing, and so we wrote a fair amount about that in more the latter chapters, and also, what enterprises need to do to get ready. But in a way, it was also on occasion the sort of down boy because, there's a lot of hype about agentic.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, well, what's the evidence for this? And how does this work? And so on. So, there's some crypto stuff in the book, which I tried to tone down, but I think I was unsuccessful in everything.
In general, what would you say excites you the most about agentic?
I think it's the greater level of intelligence that we'll have in our workflows. Uh, I, you know, I'm personally advocating something that I think Blue Prism probably advocates as well, which is that this should be a mixture of various different AI types and even non-AI tools, but the not only generative AI, but also what I call analytical AI, more traditional machine learning to do predictions, and then the deterministic AI. I'm still, rules, and I think it's the only, by definition, it's the only type of AI that's not probabilistic. And in many cases, I think we'll want things that we can really rely upon and know how it's going to happen every time. So I think that combination will be very powerful, actually, assuming people don't get too carried away and think generative AI can do it all.
Right.
I think we're already seeing evidence that just using generative AI doesn't work very well. You may have seen, I wrote a little piece. I started writing a Substack column or whatever it's called, just because I wanted to say more about humans and AI. I've written my pieces now, and the latest one was about agents and what's the role of humans there. And I said, people are starting to see some sort of cracks in the agent side, taking purely generative AI as the driver of agents. So you may have seen this one out of Carnegie Mellon, where this agent could only do 24% of the tasks. That was from Anthropic, and ironically, Anthropic had its Claude agent, which it called Claudius, run a little store, and that was kind of an disaster. And Gardner had a negative prediction. So about agents, as usual, about it without much data for how this was going to turn out. 40%, I think, would be canceled, they said, by 2027 of agent projects. So I think people are starting to say, maybe we do need a mixture of technologies if we're going to make these things truly successful.
That's really interesting. I was going to ask about your, from your vantage point, do you see most companies making the move to agentic with existing platforms that they already have in place, a combination of those things, or are they getting enamored with the third party kind of agent for hire type solutions that are out there? Because every day there's another one of those out there that, a startup that pops up that says, hey, we have an agent that, fills out all your proposals for you. And that those seem to be a dime a dozen, but are you seeing it as more the other side, where they're starting using platforms they have, technologies they have, to kind of, move in that direction in a more methodical way?
I think that's fair to say. I mean, in general, there certainly is a degree of conservatism about jumping in, and either it's sort of taking existing technology and kind of combining it together with agents somehow, or it's doing an internal only use case in the short run. I've heard of several kind of HR oriented things that companies are doing, particularly, I think, in regulated industries like financial services. I have yet to see one that does financial transactions without a lot of human intervention. So even in small business, I was talking to some people at Intuit about agent they've developed within QuickBooks that does accounts payable, and it will extract the information from the invoices and so on, and do the actual payment transaction, but just a lot of approvals along the way. And certainly you look at the generative AI only agents, the ones from OpenAI and Anthropic and so on, it's asking you every 30 seconds, is this okay? Is this okay? Which kind of takes away the productivity gains.
Yeah, absolutely. And your point about Gen AI, we absolutely agree with your thoughts there. I think even internally, we've used it quite a bit in producing some educational videos and things like that. And it's been amazing to me how any of the models, not just one or particular one, but they'll do a great job of like picking out clips that you should use in a documentary style video that you're creating. But if it picks a quote, and this happened with Grok last week, it picks a quote that it likes, that it thinks is really appropriate, but it doesn't like the last sentence of the quote. So it just rewrote it, or it, in some cases, summarizes it in a different way. And just the fact that it takes that step is somewhat shocking and surprising. And, it was no harm done, because when we go and pull the clip, it's going to be the real quote. But I just thought it was interesting how it almost has a mind of its own. Like, yeah, this clip would be perfect here, but let's make it even better. And so I think that's, to me, just one very small example of how a workflow that is depending heavily on Gen AI has got to have so many guardrails around it, and human in the loop, as well, to ensure that it's not doing something, with sensitive data or with financial data, as you said, improperly.
Yeah, I think there's going to have to be some ability to either review carefully before executing, or the ability to, back out that transaction somehow if it's something that you don't want. And even as I describe it to people at parties, they'll say, I've heard about this agentic thing. What is it? And you say, well, instead of planning your vacation, only planning your vacation for you, it will make your reservations and buy the airline seats and so on. And people are just freaked out. Why would I do that? I think where even though there is a huge amount of hype about agents, I think it's going to be quite a while before we have, large scale usage of them for really important transactional work. And it's funny, in this book, Pascal was the co-author of mine, Ian Barkin, on intelligent automation. And this book, like several other sources I've seen, makes the comparison to different levels of autonomous driving, the Society for Automotive Engineers classification. And it basically, if you look at the lower levels, 1 and 2 sound a lot like robotic process automation. 3 intelligent process automation. 4 and 5 don't really exist yet. Basically, I think it's a slight upgrade so far on what we were thinking of for intelligent process automation, which was mostly around predictive AI, analytical AI. But now, of course, you can do a lot with generative AI as well. And I think right now it's sort of like IPA, only with generative AI in addition to AI.
Right. I no disagreement here. So I was going to ask you about adoption of agentic as my next question, and you always have a great pulse on the market and what's reality versus myth. What would you say the adoption has been of agents that are truly agentic? They're showing some level of autonomy and their own kind of self-direction. Do you see, I mean, do you have companies that you talk to that are actually doing any of that yet? Or is it all kind of talk at this point?
All I've seen is talk, except for some, startups that
Yeah.
are saying they have agents that can, write code or,
Yeah.
I mean, Pascal has a newsletter on Agentic, which I think is quite good. And they produce the newsletter with a lot of help from agents. One does the research and one does the formatting and one the checking and so on.
Yep.
Still with some checking by humans before it goes out to the world, but
Yeah.
saves a lot of time and effort. So I think for that kind of thing, no financial transactions are involved, sort of a combination of research and
Yeah.
communications. I think they're pretty well suited. Right. And you also hear, it's funny, I was just writing something about enterprise applications of generative AI versus individual ones. And my co-author said, use the Salesforce Agentforce chatbot. Or I don't know, maybe that's doing it a disservice. It's sort of agent, I guess.
Right.
Agentforce agent, which seems a little redundant. And I keep trying to figure out, well, exactly how is it different from a customer service chatbot? And the argument seems to be, well, it uses generative AI, but a lot of, customer service chatbots use generative AI now. So I think there may be some agent washing going on.
Yes. Hear that term a lot these days.
Yeah.
And I heard it last week, actually, in an article from Gartner that they put out. I'm sure you saw it. And they said that there's a lot of projects, a lot of POCs and what have you going on with agentic, but they made the prediction that like 40% of them will be shut down within, a couple of years. Do you agree with them on that? And why do you think they're putting that out there and they feel as, pessimistic about the prospects of those projects?
Yeah, I wrote that it's a little puzzling that brand new technology would already be entering the trough of disillusionment. No, I think the number is going to be 42%, Brad.
Okay. You got to take a risk and just go out there and, tell them what you think. So
I think there are, in a way, it's not that different from what we've seen with generative AI. Most of those, unfortunately, have been POCs, pilots, and so on. And it's only now, and we're what, almost 3 years into at least ChatGPT, that they are starting to really create some enterprise level projects. And you have big companies like J&J and Coca-Cola, I mentioned a couple of those article that I'm working on that have said, we're not going to bother with these little individual, totally bottom up things. And I think the same thing will be true for agentic, that companies will get serious about it and pick some use cases that are really appropriate for it, and will do the necessary work. It's funny, I was writing another article. I do some work with Deloitte, and I've drafted a article for Harvard Business Review that was the intended destination for them on agentic related stuff. And somebody commented, it seems like two people wrote this article, one who's very bullish about it, and another is saying, but there are a lot of risks and you have to be very careful and so on. And so I'm kind of schizophrenic about the whole thing right now, I guess.
Yeah.
So I was the only person who wrote both sides. So.
Well, within our company, we've deployed some agents, 20 some odd agents. They're not fully autonomous agents by any means. But what we have found is by getting those out there and taking kind of a governance first approach and then being able to show customers how to do the same and how to mitigate a lot of the risk, that seems to make a difference. Give them something real, not academic or theoretical. Are you finding that as well, that companies in general are a little exhausted with all the hype and all the talk, and they're really just looking for real, tangible example that they can kind of latch onto?
I think so. And it's after several years of generative AI hype to have all this agentic AI hype is almost too much for a lot of organizations, I think. But yeah, I think there's going to be a major vendor role in this, and a big part of it is going to be the certification that the agent works as designed. And we didn't really have smartphone apps take off until Apple and Google and so on developed, app stores where they would test an app before putting it on the app store.
Right.
And that was a big part of the value that they extracted from the sale. And I think the same thing will be true in this case, that if you already have Blue Prism and Blue Prism says, yeah, well, we have this agent that does this and we tried it out and it works well, and it's a little hub that you can, easily connect up. I think people are very appealing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'd love to get your thoughts a little bit more on this topic of governance. In the book, I think the book described it as governed autonomy. So what do you think are some practical strategies organizations can adopt to kind of balance, the agent control and independence?
Well, I don't know if I've revealed this on any of my previous appearances on this podcast, but I really am not a huge fan of the term governance. I do think, there are some things that really require sort of human policy and oversight and so on, but I'd much rather see things happen automatically whenever possible. And so, if you're accessing data that you're not supposed to be accessing, you get a message saying, sorry, can't let you do that. Or the IT organization gets a message saying this user is trying to access it that way. My co-author on my previous book, Ian Barkin, I think generated the idea of bumper bowling that, prevent from throwing gunner balls. And so that I think is a big part of it, but also the sort of other ways you can help people by educating them and giving them places to turn when they need help in designing an application and so on. Because I think ultimately, assuming agents work well, it won't just be a sort of highly centralized IT thing. It'll be people all over the organization saying, well, I'm going to combine this, this, and this. You want to make sure that the pieces that they're combining are all doing what they're supposed to, and that prevent the person from getting into trouble.
Right. Do you think in general, organizations are ready to cede more decision-making to machines, or do you think agentic is really going to primarily take hold in areas like research and customer service and things like that have less probability of causing serious issue, if they go awry?
Well, I think there are, obviously it depends on the industry. There's some industries where there are regulatory constraints to decision making. I can't underwrite an insurance policy with
Right.
an agent without, having that being fully approved by the regulators. And transparency about how the decision is being made. Same in banking. Um, uh, but we do have a fair number of examples of repeatable, fairly structured decisions that are made by machines all the time. You apply for a credit card, you'd be hard pressed to find a person to talk to about it, for example. And I think
Yeah.
maybe we'll have, a little bit more subtlety in those kinds of decisions. Maybe you'll be able to say, I always would tell some of my friends who would, or some of my students who would come to the US from countries that don't really have a credit score, and they'd apply for a credit card. And I've been told, I think this was true, really the only way to talk to a human is to leave some places blank on the application. And then maybe if they want you bad enough, they would talk to you. Maybe now we could say, I'm from this country that doesn't have a credit score, but here's some other ways to establish my financial responsibility. And it could make a decision on that basis by having, generative AI read it and say, yeah, well, this sounds convincing. But, I don't know. I must say, I use generative AI a lot in my classes. And last year, I'm teaching again in the fall, but last fall, for the first time, I tried generative AI grading. And I graded it as well. I didn't want my students to think that I was just goofing off, but it did give a lot more feedback than I did. It would give like pages and pages of feedback. But every grade, basically, every student got the same grade. If we're doing that with credit, that's not so good.
Yeah. That's hilarious. That's funny.
I think everybody basically got a B plus.
Yeah. It's generative AI, is more socialistic in their grading. Everyone needs the same grade, but I'm going to give lots of feedback to help them.
Please, that's why books and citations and so on.
Yeah. You mentioned your students. I'm curious, what do they think about Agentic? I mean, are they really excited about this and feel like they're in school and soon to enter the workforce at just the right time, or is it creating more anxiety for them?
I think some of both. We tend to get a lot of students who want to be entrepreneurial, and people are quite excited about that. And, they all want to be the one person unicorn with agents doing the vast majority of the work. Although, I don't think that's feasible yet. Maybe at some point. I hear Sam Altman talking about it now. But I think they are definitely, even more, the undergraduates are really worried about entry-level hiring. And I'm worried about it as well. I don't think we have any real strong evidence to say that the unemployment rate at the entry level now has gone up because of agents or AI in general, but it does worry me. And I think we need to start treating it as a real issue from a kind of a policy perspective.
No doubt at all. Let me ask you about another aspect of education in general. My colleague and I yesterday were talking about something in the news about this school in Texas that is now expanding, that has developed this kind of unique and they call it revolutionary way to educate K through 12 kids. And they're using AI tutors for 2 hours a day with these kids. And then the rest of the day, they're talking about life skills and teaching them how to have critical thinking and adaptability and, things like that. It's pretty radical and, it has been controversial to a degree, depending on perspectives. And what are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you think do you think that AI is going to enable us to make some huge changes to the way that we educate our younger people on into college? I mean, it's clearly they're all using Gen AI. Even the grade schoolers are using Gen AI to some degree, but
I'm shocked, simply shocked to hear that, Brad.
of course,
No, yeah, I think we need experiments. The fact is, though, we don't really know exactly the best way to address this. I was listening yesterday to the news, and you may have heard that one of the big teachers unions has developed a collaboration, I think, with Microsoft and maybe OpenAI and so on. And they're going to teach teachers the best way to use AI in the instruction process. And I was saying to myself, almost exactly when the person, and I think it was NPR, was talking about this, we don't really know yet what's the best way to use AI. And while I think it's really important to have a lot of different experiments, I'm not sure I would want experiments on my kid. You know, what if it turns out to be really bad? There does seem to be if it's a well-designed system, there seems to be a good ability to tutor kids. And we're seeing a fair amount of evidence that kids can learn faster. I was hearing about a system in China recently that's been very effective and even better than the highest quality teachers that they have ranked. But I don't know, to build a whole school around it, it may be a little bit early, I would say. I think I might wait a little while, because we've had, previous enthusiasms about IT-based instruction, and didn't work very well, and it really didn't work well during COVID. So, but it's really hard, I find, to get students to use it in the right way.
right.
If they're on their own, they want to take the easy way out. There was an article in the paper last week, and it's quite depressing, talking to college kids as an English professor, and they're all using it as you suggest, and they're mostly using it without a lot of critical thinking, without a lot of revision, et cetera. And that really worries me. Although I try really diligently to get my students to use it the right way, with multiple prompts to see what works, and then editing it thereafter and checking citations. And one of them said, it was easier when we could just paraphrase a Wikipedia article than doing it the way you're describing.
And check the math. They're really bad at math, I found consistently. But they apologize when you call them out on that. And they're the emotional intelligence that's been added, which is still funny to me that's such a priority for a lot of the big tech companies to make them more. I guess more people are using them as friends and advisors and what have you. So maybe that's why it needs to be there. But and I think ultimately we'll have the something that will ask us what we want to do, and when we describe it, it will send us to something. Oh, you want to do math? We actually have someone that can do math. You want psychological counseling? Yeah, we have one that's really good at that. You want to write essays? Yeah, but we're going to have you review it before you turn it in, or along those lines. Yeah. Well, Tom, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for joining us for appearance number 4, and we'll get you a T-shirt or a sticker or to put on your car or something, so you can let the world know that you're our 4-time guest. But thank you for sharing your thoughts on this. I knew that you would have some really interesting opinions. You're always kind of on the leading edge of these various technology revolutions that we go through. So thank you for giving us some time, and I wish you the very best.
Thanks. You too, Brad. Should we schedule number 5 yet?
Well, let's do it. Let's do it. Take
Thanks
care.
a lot.
Thank you for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of enterprise AI, subscribe now. The future of work is here.